We're coming to the end of our study in Romans 9 through 11, and this, of course, as I've said, is the definitive statement on the part of God with regard to Jews and the fact that He continues to have a place for them. The question is raised in Romans chapter 11, verse 1. I ask then, did God reject His people? And this whole text of Romans 9 through 11 is in response to this question. Has God rejected His people? And it's with an emphatic no that we get. There are four admonitions that God, through the Apostle Paul, give us in Romans 11. And I want to just briefly look over this, and they reach a climax in verse 26. Please be with us next week, because that's the climax of Romans 9 through 11, and we'll be looking at that. The four admonitions are this. In verse 17, it says, you, a wild olive tree, speaking of Gentiles who've been grafted in. That's a term that's used. The wild olive shoot have been grafted in among the others, and now share in the nourishing sap of the olive tree, of the olive root. And the olive root is simply a metaphor for the patriarchs and the believing descendants that have emerged from them over the centuries. Do not boast over those branches. You Gentile believers, don't boast over these Jewish believers. If you do, consider this. You do not support the root, but the root supports you. The root of our belief is in the patriarchs and the faith of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and the believing remnant that has emerged over the centuries since then. Don't boast over them. You do not support the root, but the root supports you. Verse 19, you will say then, branches were broken off. Jewish unbelievers were broken off, so that I, as a non-Jew, could be grafted in. Granted, but they were broken off because of unbelief. And you stand by faith. So do not be ignorant. There's a second admonition. First is do not boast. The second is do not be ignorant, or do not be arrogant. But be afraid, for if God did not spare the natural branches, He will not spare you. Do not boast, do not be arrogant. Now he's talking about those who would replace Israel with the church or with Palestinians. He goes on in verse 25, I do not want you to be ignorant. Do not be ignorant of this mystery, brothers, so that you may not be conceited. Do not be ignorant. Do not be conceited. There's the four admonitions that God gives to the Apostle Paul. And basically he is saying these admonitions to those who would say, in this case that we're talking about, the Palestinians have usurped. They have their rights transcend the rights of the Jewish people that have been decreed to them by God through the covenant that God made with Abraham and his descendants that includes the land. So this is very important. These are the characteristics of those who would subscribe to replacement theology or supersessionism. And God says through the Apostle Paul, do not boast against them, do not be arrogant, do not be ignorant, and do not be conceited. Now these admonitions are as valid today as the day that they were given. And they speak to those in high places, evangelicals. Too many of our Christian churches, evangelical churches, too many of our evangelical colleges and universities have faculty members who would subscribe to replacement theology. Namely, in this case, that the Palestinians, their rights to the land supersede the rights of the Jewish people that have been decreed by God. These are the admonitions. Do not boast, do not be arrogant, do not be ignorant, and do not be conceited. That remains the truth of God. And that is the truth.